All right, boys, what's going on? We are back. Keg, back with you for another UFC Fight Night main event breakdown video. We got a couple big boys, Augusto Sakai, Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Now, the UFC obviously off last weekend, which is always a bummer because we love to watch people punch other people in the face, but sometimes you need a week off. So here we are. The card starts 4 o'clock Eastern. I like the card. There aren't any real, names for the casual fans, but for the diehards, I think that there's a ton of really interesting fights. I think it's going to be entertaining. I did find it challenging from a betting perspective this week. Found a few angles that I liked, which are on the spreadsheet over on the Run Pure Sports website, including the one that I'm going to give out right now. I'm currently multitasking as I watch this NASCAR Xfinity race, trying to figure out if we should hop in live. But here we go. All right, Augusto Sakai, Jairzinho Rozenstruik, couple top 10 heavyweights, which appear to be going in two different directions momentum-wise. The current odds right now have Rozenstruik at minus 125, which is basically where it's been all week. The comeback's around even money on Augusto Sakai. And I guess I'll start with Sakai. He's won 5 of his first 6 fights in the UFC. Now, that's if you include his Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series win. But even though he continues to pick up wins, I've never really been impressed with Augusto Sakai. There's no aspect of his MMA game that excites me at all. So for a heavyweight, he really doesn't have that one-punch knockout power that you would expect a guy that weighs 265 pounds to have. I think he's slow. I think his hand speed's really slow. His footwork depresses me. It's that unexciting. And he's extremely flat-footed in the cage. Doesn't really have a wrestling base. Never got a submission inside the cage. But the one thing that he does really well for a heavyweight is he throws a ton of volume. A lot of volume. And oftentimes that volume that he throws is enough to steal rounds and eventually win fights, which is part of the reason why he's won 5 of his last 6 fights. Now, you can make an argument that 2 of those wins were split decision wins, meaning one judge in both fights actually gave it to Sakai's opponent. But, nonetheless, he continues to win. So if I was going to sum the guy up as a fighter, he's never going to throw anything that's going to hurt somebody that's got a decent chin. And but he will throw a lot. He will throw a lot of volume. And most of all, while he's doing this, he stands right in front of you, right in the pocket, right in your face. And because of how slow he is, and because of how slow his footwork is, he's incredibly hittable on the counter all the time in the cage. So now Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who, anybody that watched me and Dave 3 years ago breaking down MMA, we were really high on Rozenstruik. I was a huge fan of him when the UFC signed him. We knew him as a kickboxer. That was a problem. He won 76 out of 84 kickboxing matches before he enters the UFC. So there was a ton of hype about him. He looked like he was a special striker, carried power, comes into the UFC, thought he was a really exciting prospect. And, first 3 fights, blows right through his opponents, all by knockout. And everything's fine and dandy. And then he goes and fights Alistair Overeem, right? And that was the first time that we saw one major flaw that Rozenstruik has. And that's his inability to pull the trigger and engage. He hesitates in exchanges, and it is absolutely infuriating if you back him, right? So he hesitates for about 25 minutes against Overeem, right? Overeem just puts it on him. He's about to win the fight 5 rounds to none. He puts on a striking clinic like only Alistair Overeem can do, right, as a heavyweight. And then what happens? Now Rozenstruik loses every round, right? He finally realizes that I'm about to lose this fight horrifically. And he finally starts to let those ham hocks go. With about 30 seconds left in a 5-round fight, he starts swinging for the fences, trying to get the kill shot. And what happens with about 8 seconds left in the fight? He breaks Overeem's face in half, literally, like almost split it in half. And Overeem gets the knockout loss. Jairzinho Rozenstruik gets the win, which he had no business winning and didn't deserve. But he got the win. And in retrospect, that's the worst thing that could have happened to him, because he was bailed out and thought that his style of not throwing, looking for the kill shot, paid off. And it affirmed in his mind that was the right way to approach fighting, right? And it's not. So what happens in the next fight? Runs through Junior Dos Santos. The fight after that, Francis Ngannou, who is a freak and is the current UFC heavyweight champion, knocks him out in 20 seconds. I don't blame him for that loss. It's Francis Ngannou. What are you going to do? What happens? But then in his last fight, he fights Cyril Gane, okay? Now, if you took the plus 250 shot on Rozenstruik in that fight, it was absolutely infuriating to watch that guy not throw a punch for 25 minutes. Literally. He didn't throw a punch. He did nothing. So, what does all that mean for tonight? Well, first of all, the fact that the UFC gave Rozenstruik another 5-round main event fight off that shit show of a performance against Cyril Gane tells you that UFC matchmaker Mick Maynard, Sean Shelby, they like him. They believe in him, and they're backing him. And here he is again in another 5-round main event, right? So if you take a look at the fighters, 24 laps to go, by the way. If you take a look at the fighters that Rozenstruik has not been successful against, they either have life-changing power like Francis Ngannou, right? Or they have the ability with rock-solid footwork to dart in and out of range, in and out of the pocket, pick Rozenstruik apart from the outside while he does absolutely nothing. And that's what Cyril Gane did. But if you look at the fighters that Rozenstruik has been successful against, right, they're much slower. They're flat-footed. They stand in the pocket for the most part, and they don't have devastating power, okay? Like Arlovsky doesn't really have devastating power anymore. He got the win over him. His win over Alan Crowder. That sums Alan Crowder up in a nutshell. His win over Junior Dos Santos, again, a shell of himself. That sums up exactly what I just said that Rozenstruik is successful against again, right? So I would argue that tonight is the best chance that Rozenstruik has to pick up a win here, probably since his fight against Andrei Arlovsky 2 years ago. Because, Rozenstruik does a couple things really well. He'll always keep his opponents honest with leg kicks. He attacks the calf, which seems to be the trend right now in the UFC, right? And regardless of whether he's walking forward or he's on his back foot, that check left hook, particularly off the counter, is devastating. It ends people's nights, full stop. So I just think that he's in a really good spot to pick up a win against somebody that he's going to be way more comfortable against than the two losses he took with Ngannou and Cyril Gane. Okay, now for the first time this week, while doing media in the lead up to the fight, Rozenstruik finally acknowledged the fact that he hesitates and he doesn't pull the trigger. And he said, you know, him and his coaches realized and made a conscious effort that he has to be first to exchange. Moving forward, no hesitation. You got to beat Sakai to the punch first. Now, we've never heard that from Rozenstruik. I've never heard him acknowledge the fact that his hesitation is infuriating, right? So now he has to prove it. It's good to talk about it, but now he's got to prove it. And you know what? I've backed Rozenstruik a lot of times, and he's jammed me up before. But I'm willing to back him here one more time. And if he jams me up here, this will probably be the last time that I ever back him in his UFC career. Because I think Sakai is hittable enough to make Rozenstruik feel comfortable enough to finally engage. And it's not like Sakai throws anything that Rozenstruik's not going to be able to handle. He's got a really good chin. I mean, throw out the Ngannou fight because everybody would get knocked out against Francis Ngannou. Put that aside, his chin has held up well. So I really don't see Sakai throwing anything that's going to hurt him. And I think Sakai is slow. He'll be in the pocket. He's flat-footed. And he's hittable enough to where I think Sakai will probably he'll be winning the fight right up until the moment that he doesn't. And he gets starched and dropped. So I'm going to pay the freight one more time on Rozenstruik. And if he fucks me here, I'm off the train. So give me Jairzinho Rozenstruik by knockout plus 135. And that's it, boys. That's the pick for the main event. I'll be back at 3:15 in about 20 minutes with Coop. We're going to do a NASCAR pre-race video for tomorrow's race at Sonoma. Should be a good race. It's a road course. We usually know how they go when it comes to NASCAR. It's going to be a busy weekend. After I do that video in 20 minutes with Coop, JJ's coming on at 4 to talk some MLB for a half an hour. Then I'll be back on 4:30, 4:45 to do the UFC Fightcast all night long on the Run Pure Bets YouTube channel. And then tomorrow, obviously, we have the race at 3:30. We'll be live all day. So give me Rozenstruik by knockout plus 135. We'll take the shot one more time. Regardless of what you guys bet this week, I hope your action runs pure. Hope you crush them, and I'll see you in a bit.